May 5th, 1945. Germany had 2 days left. The war in Europe was essentially over. Everyone knew it. Hitler was dead. Berlin had fallen. The surrendering was already happening. But in a small mountain castle in the Austrian Alps, a battle was about to begin. And the two sides fighting it were not the ones you would expect. On one side, SS troops, the most fanatical soldiers in the German military, still fighting, still killing, refusing to accept that the war was finished. On the other side, a US Army captain with 14 soldiers and 1 Sherman tank, a defecting German major, 20 Wehrmacht soldiers who had switched sides. And locked inside the castle walls, the former Prime Minister of France, the former Supreme Commander of the French Army, a Nobel Peace Prize winner, and the sister of Charles de Gaulle. Oh, and a Wimbledon tennis champion who, at the height of the battle, climbed the castle wall and jumped over to go get help. This actually happened. Let's go back to 1943. Castle Itter, Schloss Itter, was a medieval fortress in the mountains of the Austrian Tyrol, not far from the German border. In 1943, the SS converted it into a very specific kind of prison, not for common criminals, not for resistance fighters, for trophies. The prisoners of Castle Itter were the most politically valuable people the Nazi regime had captured. French VIPs who could be used as bargaining chips, or simply held to prevent them from organizing resistance from exile. By 1945, the castle held Paul Reynaud, the French prime minister who had been in office when Germany invaded France in 1940, the man who had pleaded with Churchill for more RAF fighters as Paris fell. Edouard Daladier, another former French prime minister who had signed the Munich Agreement in 1938. Maxime Weygand, the former supreme commander of the French armed forces. Marie-Agnès Caillot, Charles de Gaulle's older sister, arrested by the Gestapo for resistance activities. Léon Jouhaux, the most important trade union leader in France, who would go on to win the Nobel Peace Prize in 1951. And Jean Barotra, one of the most famous athletes in France, a tennis champion who had won Wimbledon and the French Open, imprisoned because he had tried to escape to North Africa to join the Free French. These were not ordinary prisoners, and in May 1945, they were in serious danger. Here is the problem. As Germany collapsed, SS units across Austria were not simply surrendering, they were executing people. Political prisoners, resistance fighters, anyone who might testify against the regime. The SS commander of the Innsbruck region had reportedly given an order. The prisoners of Castle Itter were not to be liberated. They were to be shot before the Americans arrived. The castle's SS garrison began to disintegrate. Guards deserted. The commander fled. But the SS units in the surrounding mountains were still there. And then something remarkable happened. A German army major named Josef Gangl had spent the final weeks of the war in a quiet act of defection. Gangl was not a Nazi ideologue. He was a professional soldier who had served on the Eastern Front, had watched what the regime actually was up close, and had made a decision. By early 1945, he had made contact with the Austrian resistance, a network of civilians and military defectors working to prevent the SS from destroying the region before surrender. On May 4th, 1945, Gangl reached the American lines. He found Captain John Lee of the 12th Armored Division. He told Lee about the castle, about who was inside, about the SS threat. Lee did not hesitate. He gathered 14 soldiers, 1 Sherman tank, a tank he named Besotten Jenny, and he followed a defecting German major into enemy territory to rescue prisoners he had never heard of in a castle he had never seen on a map.
They arrived at Castle Itter on the evening of May 4th. Lee met the prisoners. He assessed the situation. He had 14 men, 1 tank, and a group of about 20 Wehrmacht soldiers loyal to Gangl. German soldiers who had decided the war was wrong and were now prepared to fight their own side to end it. This was the alliance: American soldiers, Wehrmacht defectors, and the imprisoned former leaders of France. The French prisoners, Reynaud, Weygand, Dalady, were not passive. They armed themselves with weapons left behind by the deserting guards. They took positions on the castle walls. Jean Borotra volunteered for the most dangerous job. If communications failed, he would go over the wall himself to find help. Nobody told him this was not a reasonable plan. Nobody said, "You are in your mid-40s and this is an active combat zone." He said he would do it. They let him. The SS attacked at dawn on May 5th. A battalion, estimates range from 100 to 300 soldiers, moved on the castle from multiple directions. They had artillery. They had armored vehicles. They had the numbers. Lee's Sherman tank, Besotten Jenny, held the main road. Every time SS troops advanced up the approach, the tank fired. Inside, the French prisoners fought alongside the Americans. Paul Reynaud, the former Prime Minister of France, was firing a rifle from the battlements. The situation was becoming critical. The Sherman was a target. The castle walls could not hold forever. And then Jean Borotra climbed to the top of the wall, looked at the SS troops on one side and the mountains on the other, and jumped. He ran through the fighting, reached the American lines, and found a relief column from the 12th Armored Division.
The relief arrived within hours, but before it did, in the final minutes of the battle, Major Joseph Gangl was killed. He was standing next to Paul Reynaud when a sniper's bullet found him. He died protecting the French Prime Minister. The SS withdrew when the American reinforcements arrived. The battle was over. The prisoners of Castle Itter were alive.
2 days later, May 7th, 1945, Germany signed its unconditional surrender. The Battle of Castle Itter was almost certainly the last land battle fought in Western Europe in the Second World War. And here is what makes it unlike any other battle in the entire 6-year conflict. It was the only battle in WWII in which American and German soldiers fought on the same side. Joseph Gangl was posthumously honored by both Austria and France. His name is on memorials in the Tyrol. He is remembered as a hero, a German soldier who chose to be on the right side of history, even when it cost him his life. Leon Jouhou accepted the Nobel Peace Prize 6 years later. Borotra lived to 94. Captain John Lee received the Distinguished Service Cross. And Besotten Jenny, the Sherman tank that held the road alone, was found after the battle, still in position.
There's a version of history where the prisoners of Castle Itter were executed before the Americans arrived, where the SS did what the SS did, where none of this happened. That version is the probable version. The version that actually happened required a German major willing to betray his own army, an American captain willing to follow him into the dark, 20 Wehrmacht soldiers willing to fight their own side, a tennis champion willing to jump off a castle wall, and a collection of French politicians willing to pick up rifles and stand on the battlements. Every single one of them had to make a choice.
every single one of them made the right one. That's real.